Remember when you first landed on the Halo ring back in Halo 1? If you were fortunate enough to have the same experience as me, you were a younger kid awed by the open spaces of the second level, especially after the first level was all cramped hallways typical of sci-fi shooters of the time. The vast fields, the open blue sky, the alien ships flying overhead taking shots at you, the long, thin bridge extending across a deep chasm, and above you, the Halo ring, reaching the horizon on either side. This sense of wonder and awe was characteristic of Halos 1, 2, and 3, but I don't think that feeling has ever really been present in any of the Halos since. Halo Infinite, the latest in the series, has tried to remind people of this sense of wonder by essentially making an entire game based on the second level of Halo 1. It follows the same format of a cramped level to begin with, and then transitions into wide open spaces for the majority of the game. I applaud them for trying this approach rather than what Halo 4 and 5 attempted, with more traditional arena levels, more at home in a game like Call of Duty or another equally linear shooter. But Infinite didn't really leave me with the same sense of wonder as Halo 1 did, and I've been trying to figure out why. I'm sure part of it has to do with me not being a young kid anymore, and the fact that Halo Infinite was released in 2021 instead of 2001, when gamers have seen this sort of thing many times over by now. Wide open spaces aren't as novel of a concept. But I think there's more to it than that. I think something about the way Bungie's Halos used the concept of mysteriousness and awe is different than 343's iterations of the series. In this video, I will attempt to explain why, and I will arbitrarily group my points into 3 different but not quite distinct categories: environments, characters, and Forerunner lore. These categories are merely a half-baked attempt to make this video less of a rambly mess, and I suppose it's up to you to be the judge of whether that works or not. Regardless, let's start with environments. The original 3 Halos had huge structures that were almost empty, full of flat surfaces and high ceilings, implicitly encouraging the player to fill in the blanks. I'm sure that in the first Halo this was less of an intentional design choice and more of a limitation of the graphics capabilities of the original Xbox. But the fact is that Bungie carried this approach of nearly empty structures forward through Halo 3, where there would have certainly been the option of filling the areas up with more decorations and sci-fi lights. In fact, this is exactly what 343 does in their remasters of Halo 1 and 2. They fill up every area with a bunch of small details that I assume is an attempt to make them feel more fleshed out and sci-fi. However, to me, this takes away the element of imagination from the player. In a weird way, having less details in the game gave me more of a sense of awe than a space filled to the brim with lens flares and blinking panels. Bungie's environments felt more ancient and desolate, where the player felt like the dark corners were hiding secrets just waiting to be uncovered. In 343's games, their remasters of the originals, as well as Halo 4 onwards, there is little left to the imagination. Every corner is lit up, making it look visually pretty, but not very mysterious. The environments in Bungie's Halos, especially the first one, are generally presented as an area to gradually explore, and there is a certain calmness about the quiet snowfall in 2 Betrayals, or Halo 2's library levels, even as the player is mowing down Covenant and Flood in massive battles. I never felt this same peace during Halo 4, 5, or Infinite. Every area felt like a battle to be pushed through and a sprint towards the next objective. There's a sense of urgency given through plot points and dialogue in 343's Halos, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely a complete opposite from Bungie's Halos, where a lot of areas felt like they could be slowly explored in a meandering sort of way towards the next objective. Halo 3 may be an exception to this, as that one's plot has more of a mad dash feeling to it. By and large, though, Bungie's Halos make the player feel like a lone wanderer traversing vast environments and slowly uncovering them, whereas Halo 4 and 5 make you a member of a squad, pushing through battle after battle to reach the end. Halo Infinite made the good choice to change the player back to a lone wanderer, so it definitely comes the closest towards resembling Bungie's Halos, at least in that respect. However, where Infinite fails is a use of light. Remember I said that there were dark corners to be explored in Bungie's Halos. I meant that quite literally. The original Halo games are very visually dark. They require the use of the flashlight. I don't believe I ever had to use the flashlight in Halo Infinite, other than the one early level where it's introduced as a gameplay mechanic. None of 343's games are ever dark. They seem scared to lower the lighting, even going so far as to brighten every part of Halo 1 and 2 in their remasters. Hallways that were once dark and foreboding are now filled with light. Every nook and cranny is clearly visible. I am baffled at this approach. I imagine some players must have complained about eye strain or something, because it does seem that 343 is doing this as an intentional design choice. But it takes away so much of the mystery of Halo to have every area clearly visible at all times. I suppose one could make the argument that it improves moment-to-moment gameplay, since you are clearly able to see all enemies, but honestly, I far prefer to be surprised by an elite jumping out at me from a corner to seeing him from 100 yards off and dispatching him with a few headshots. Before I move on from environments, I have to mention the music of Halo. I likely don't have to say much. I think everyone is familiar with Marty O'Donnell's iconic Halo music. The Gregorian chant leads to a sense of wonder and awe whenever it is used, amplifying the environments by its inclusion. Bungie's Halo music is uplifting and slow-moving in moments where it's supposed to be, and Halo Infinite made a good choice in returning to this style of music. Halo 4 and 5's music is largely forgettable, much more actiony and fast-moving like more typical first-person shooters. The function of that music is to make the player feel fast, not fill them with a sense of wonder. Halo Infinite returned to the Gregorian chant, but being an open world, the music cues feel much more random than Bungie's Halos. It's hard to plan for certain musical pieces to play at certain times, when the player can take any path they want from objective to objective. Halo 1 through 3 are more loosely linear than Halo Infinite, so Bungie could plan for musical pieces to play at certain points in the story to amplify the feelings the player was already feeling. This is less a failing of 343 in Infinite than an unavoidable failing of any open world game. In the original Halos, Master Chief didn't talk much. He was an empty shell for the player to inhabit. In 343's Halos, Chief talks a lot. We know everything he's thinking. This works for the story 343 is trying to tell, so it's not a bad choice, but it definitely takes away from a sense of identification with the player character. If Chief says something that we as a player don't feel, we are then disconnected from Chief. He feels not like us, but like his own character. This means that when in Bungie's Halo we would feel awe-inspired as Chief, in 343's Halo we now may feel awe-inspired at times, but we are reminded that Chief probably doesn't care, because he's more focused on whatever plot point he's after at the moment. This takes away a bit from the feeling of wonder, because it's tempered by the reminder that our player character most likely does not share our feelings. Cortana is more mysterious in Halo 1. I actually thought she was evil at one point when she plugged into Halo for the first time and said this line.
You all right?
Never been better. You can't imagine the wealth of information. The knowledge, so much, so fast. It's glorious.
Characters throughout Halo 1 are more ambiguous in general. 343 Guilty Spark literally appears from nowhere, and doesn't give us a straight answer on a lot of things. The Flood are explained hardly at all, leaving us to wonder where they came from. Halo 2 begins to explain these ambiguities, but introduces whole new ones, with the Prophets and the Arbiters and the Elites. Characters that we thought were mindlessly evil in Halo 1 turn out to be deceived by the Prophets into believing that all they do is for the Great Journey, and we don't even fully know if the Prophets themselves believe in this or not. Every character is nuanced, not fully evil or good. Even the Gravemind isn't fully fleshed out until Halo 3. Every character has shifting alliances, particularly 343 Guilty Spark, leading us to always wonder what side someone is going to be on. I rarely felt this in Halo 4, 5, or Infinite. All characters were on the same side throughout the entire game, their motivations were very clear, with the exception of Cortana through Halo 5. But since I still don't understand why Cortana turned evil, even after Infinite, I chalk this up to bad writing rather than intentional, murky motivations. All characters directly state what they are thinking at almost all times. In Halo 4, we have the blatantly mean captain, the helpful subordinate, the unapologetically evil didact, the unmistakably good librarian, and humanity is never questioned as the best species to inherit the mantle of responsibility. Whatever that is. The nuance that Halo 2 added to the Covenant is disregarded from Halo 4 onwards, with the elites back to being mindlessly evil without motivations of their own. Halo 5 did add the Arbiter and good elites back in, but I really don't remember them contributing much to the story, and Halo Infinite then removed them once again. Halo 5's launch trailers also seem to attempt character ambiguity, showing the Chief going rogue, but in the game we know why he did this from the start, and there's no question that Chief is good, or that Locke is just doing his job. I won't even mention any of the squad mates on either team, as they are total non-characters, not even bothering to reappear in Halo Infinite. Speaking of non-characters, the Warden Eternal. I don't believe he ever displays an ounce of personality, and you still have to fight him like 7 times, as if he matters at all. Halo Infinite doesn't even really have characters other than Chief and Cortana. Sorry, the weapon. But the pilot guy is not what I'd call ambiguous. I suppose you could call Escharum an ambiguous villain, since it's not ever clear if he's gay for Atriox or not, but I'm not sure if that counts for the type of ambiguity I'm talking about.
Atriox!
There are 2 characters in Halo Infinite that could have been mysterious, Despondent Pyre and the Harbinger. However, Despondent Pyre is killed off literally seconds after being introduced, and the Harbinger immediately explains her motivations a minute after her introduction. Seriously, I actually timed it. Let's talk about Cortana specifically, because she is the character that is the most mysterious in both Bungie and 343's Halos. Like I mentioned, she has moments in Halo 1 where you're not sure whether she's good or bad, though she does end up being good. For most of Halo 3, Cortana is captured by the Gravemind, and it's shown through visions that she's breaking down, leading you to wonder whether she'll be the same when you do rescue her. She does end up being good in the end then as well, leading you to breathe a sigh of relief. Through this, the original 3 Halos build Cortana up as a steadfast ally, a friendly voice that will always be by your side. There are moments when you're not sure if you can trust her, but she does end up proving that in fact she can be relied upon. I think this is the way to write a main companion. Halo 4 continues this well, having her ambiguous at times as she breaks down into rampancy, but in the end being the best ally you could ask for. Halo 5 throws this out in a misplaced attempt to add mysteriousness, but not really succeeding. If a character ends up not making logical sense at all, the mysteriousness they exhibit ends up leading less to a feeling of wonder and more to one of annoyance. Cortana's motivations are not explained until late in the game, but in this case, she is revealed to not really be on your side at all, and she no longer is a trustworthy companion after having been so for the past 4 games. In Halo Infinite, they go back on Halo 5's characterization, evidently realizing how bad it was, but it's difficult to salvage into a sensible plot at that point. Cortana just ends up being good at the end somehow. The weapon is hinted at maybe having the possibility to turn evil, but she never exhibits any of these tendencies, so I wouldn't really call her a mysterious character at any point. And they attempt to make the reveal of the weapon as Cortana seem like this huge revelation, when honestly I was filled with a sense of mystery as to how the writers thought this was a good plot twist in any way. I thought they had said she was Cortana at the very beginning of the game, so I was confused as to why they were revealing it a second time. So, to sum up, Bungie and 343 have both tried to make Cortana a mysterious character at times, but Bungie's characterization has ended up always making more sense in the end, whereas 343's has decidedly not. And as a whole, it can be said that the shifting alliances and complex motivations of many of Bungie's characters are not really carried over in any meaningful way in 343's Halos. Bungie's Halos had the Forerunners, an ancient alien race that purportedly built the Halo rings, and their existence was slowly uncovered throughout the games. However, they kept everything open and unexplained enough to let fans speculate and have theories about them. Halo 3 had terminals written by some mysterious Forerunners, named the Didact and the Librarian, and they revealed that some Forerunners disagreed about the course of action in fighting the Flood. These terminals were ambiguous enough, filled with parts that weren't even fully translated into our language, to add a sense of mystery to this ancient alien race. Even the terminals themselves were on a time limit, so you had to read fast to get all the information. Skip forward to Halo 4, which directly has the Didact and the Librarian themselves show up and talk to the player. The Didact is now just evil and hates humanity, and the Librarian is just good. The complex, somewhat mysterious characters from Halo 3 are now plainly spelled out, and somewhat cardboard cutouts of their original selves. Even showing what they look like ruins their mysteriousness, makes them way less awe-inspiring than what our imaginations could do. The Prometheans are revealed in Halo 4 and are initially mysterious, but are quickly explained to be the Forerunner's cyborg army, so any mysteriousness they may have had is gone. It is a cool twist that later in Halo 4, Prometheans are revealed to have originally been humans, but I wasn't really wondering what they were beforehand, since they were just explained to be the Forerunner's army. So I wasn't anxiously awaiting a reveal of what Prometheans were. They didn't really have a sense of mysteriousness to them. The twist is good, but it isn't aiming to be mysterious, just shocking. The mantle of responsibility is mysterious, but never really explained to any depth for me to really care about it all that much. This ancient, mysterious alien race of Forerunners, created and hinted at by Bungie, is suddenly not so ancient or mysterious in Halo 4 and 5. So much so that 343 decided to create another alien species out of thin air to take their place in Halo Infinite, the Endless. I was expecting some mysteriousness or awe from this race, as it seems to be the reason 343 made them, but I was sorely disappointed. As I mentioned, the motivations of the Endless were explained nearly right after their introduction, leaving me baffled. It's as if 343 thinks their audience doesn't care about mystery, that they just want all the answers right away. This is not the way to maintain interest in a story. In Bungie's Halos, the mystery of the Forerunners, the Ark, the Halo Rings, the Didact and the Librarian, the Flood, the ancient artifact beneath Africa, are all part of this ancient story that we don't have all the pieces to. In 343's Halos, it's all pretty spelled out for the player, with little room for theories or ambiguity. Part of the reason for this is no doubt 343's desire to make Halo into a cinematic universe, which every franchise seems to want to do now that Marvel has had such success with it. 343 has way more tie-ins to books and comics in their main games, with the most egregious of these being the entire alien faction in Halo Infinite having been introduced in a spin-off game, Halo Wars 2. There's less room for mystery when you're attempting to make everything fit together into a consistent universe. And I do believe that during Bungie's Halos, there were books explaining some of this mystery, but Bungie made it a point to not reference any of these books. They just wanted to make their own games, free of the burdens of external lore. Before I conclude, there are a few side notes that I should mention. Bungie's later Halos, ODST and Reach, do not have this same mysterious feeling that the original trilogy had, but that's okay. They're spin-offs, not part of the main series. Reach is clearly attempting to be a story of a massive battle with tons of Spartans, and ODST is clearly trying to be a more small-scale, personal story of normal people. They aren't mysterious, nor do they make any attempt to be. In Bungie's newest game, Destiny, they try to replicate the same mysterious vibe that the original Halos had, but they largely fail. Since they explain almost nothing, there's little to hold player interest. Some plot points do have to be explained at some point. Halo did this enough to hold our interest, but not enough to explain everything. There's a balance to be had. There are also instances in 343's Halos where I feel this sense of childlike wonder and awe, but they are few and far in between. I feel I should mention them though, just to give credit where credit is due. The moment where you exit the tunnel on Requiem near the beginning of Halo 4 and see the floating spires in the distance. The Death Star run segment near the end of Halo 4 where you get to fly a saber through the Didact ship and you exit the tunnel to see the hugeness of the final area. The parts on Sanghelios in Halo 5 where you see the structures created by the elites to presumably honor ancient deities or heroes. The areas being repaired slowly in Halo Infinite, where sections of the ring have been completely destroyed. It's clear that 343 agrees that this is the most awe-inspiring part of their game, since it's in every loading screen. And, most memorable to me, the last battle of Halo 4, where you essentially take on 3 platforms of enemies. It's the music track in this section, Arrival, that left me in awe, especially when co-oped. I will always remember looking ahead to my friends engaged in their own battles, as the epic soundtrack pushed us onwards towards the finish. It's hard to make a Halo feel like Halo without the element of awe and wonder, and this leaves me feeling largely disappointed with 343's iterations. There are other reasons for my disappointment as well, of course, but I still remember my initial feeling when I stepped onto that ring in Halo 1 as a kid. The mysterious expanse of forest and ancient ruins, waiting to be discovered. Maybe it's unfair to judge 343 for not being able to replicate this feeling that the original Halo gave me as a child. But whereas 343's games seem to always be struggling to keep the player interested by pushing them from one battle to the next, Bungie's Halos always seem to be taking a step back, letting the player freely wander the ring at their own pace, exploring what interested them, and letting the player tell their own story, rather than following a path laid out for them.